Your squat is probably the one that I want to tweak the most because it has so much potential in my eyes. At least that's and you know I'm a squat kind of guy. I feel like if anything, I wish there was only squat only meets.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of AM Training. So first of all, I apologize. I haven't uploaded in a while just because life hits. Life is definitely a little tough when you're in physical therapy school, and also you have a third kid on the way. So if you didn't know I had a third kid, shame on you. That means you're not following me on Instagram, which shame on you because my Instagram is pretty awesome. It's almost like a lazy man's YouTube. This video is inspired by Instagram. I actually took a little poll of if people were interested in seeing like my coach's eye and my video analysis is what I do for my clients, and I got a whopping hell yes. So I'm gonna upload my it's not even edited really. It was really a video toward my client, and or he just hired me. So Ryan, shout out to you for letting me use this. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments that you want to continue keep seeing this stuff, because it's kind of easy for me to do. And I asked all my clients that I did all my video analysis with if they're okay with me uploading it to YouTube. They said hell yeah. So I have nothing to hide. If my video analysis sucks, then it sucks, and you can see that I'm a shitty coach, but I like to think that I'm not. So give me a thumbs up, let me know what you think about this video, and stay tuned because it's kind of a long one. I mean, it's 30 minutes worth of video analyzing, so it's just looking at the squat, bench, deadlift for my client Ryan. It's 15 minutes I think into it, just talking about his squat. So again, he contacted me. He has a what do you call it, a meet, a competition. Sorry, I'm losing words because I just had school, but he just had a competition, or he's going to have a competition in a month, and he contacted me. So this is pretty much my critique on all his big three. So thanks again for watching, and yeah, give this video a thumbs up, please.
What's up, Ryan? This is Al. This is Coach's Eye. This is something I do for all my clients just because it's a whole lot easier to show them what I'm thinking and show them what I'm talking about rather than writing a whole damn paragraph on the little spreadsheet of your program that I want you to do. And it's just easier and kind of cool, in my opinion, to see your lift in someone else's view, especially someone I like to think that may have seen a lot of damn squats in their lives along with bench pressing and deadlifting. So, first of all, I want to thank you for choosing me as your coach. I do appreciate that. It definitely means a lot to me because it not only stokes my ego, but really I do appreciate it because you could have chosen a lot of people out there. I mean, everyone is a damn Instagram coach. Like, you do one or two meets and you're a coach, right? Or which in my case is actually the thing. I've actually competed only in two meets, but again. I am obsessed about this stuff. I think what's limiting me, it's not just competing, it's more of a money thing. I'm a cheap bastard. I know my lifts are progressing well, plus I have the whole damn internet to tell me if my lift was good or not. They will rip me a new one if my depth is not not as good as yours, actually. Look at your depth. So here is your bench, here's your squat, bench, deadlift. So here is your squat, here's your bench, and then later on we'll look at the deadlift. I'm using both screens because I shoot landscape mode, and because I'm a YouTuber, landscape is the shit. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise with their peasant portrait mode. Anyways, let's go ahead and look at your squat. As you can see, you're very deep here. So you are having a meet coming up pretty soon in 1 month, which is, to be honest, we're not going to do much on your technique as far as going up to that meet, because 1 month is nothing. I mean, it's not. It's almost like if I were to cue you and do different techniques and do different programming, you're just gonna mess yourself up just because it's like switching from conventional sumo last minute during a meet. It's not, and it's like your first time doing sumo. So that's the thing. I'm going to program you up into the meet, but it's just proper programming where we are really focusing on building up technique and decaying fatigue. So again, let's look at your squat, your deep ass squat. So if you are competing in the USAPL, you are pretty good, because I believe the rule book, actually for any federation, at least for the good federations, I'm not going to talk or throw any shade toward other federations, but USAPL and USPA, the rule is that the hip crease needs to be below the top of the knee. So you are actually pretty damn good. Actually, you would still get white lights if we brought it up right about here. At least for this angle. It's kind of hard to see with a back angle, but again, it's you're doing really well. Now, that makes me think that we need to kind of take account to the strength and I want to say that I keep stuttering. It's been a long week. I've been having 10 hours worth of school every day, and it's kicking my ass along with coaching. But let's go ahead and continue to talk. What I was gonna say is that we need to make sure that your muscles have a good length to tension relationship. So what I mean by that is that there are two properties for muscles. Well, there's more properties, but the main ones that we're concerned with is the contractibility of a muscle and also the elasticity properties of a muscle. Those are all fancy French-ass words for basically trying to take advantage of the passive tension and force that a muscle can have. Like think of a rubber band. So you have your muscles that can contract. That's the contractibility. That's our strength that we're in charge of. But then we also want to take advantage of that stretch reflex. So the stretch reflex, that's basically how people can basically jump, do a little vertical jump. They can jump higher when they do that little like dip and then they jump, rather than if they were from the start and just go from up. Hopefully that makes sense. So we're putting that tension on there, so we're utilizing contractible force and also the force of a strength reflex or stretch reflex. So that's the elasticity property. So how would we do that? So it's hard to explain it because there are so many things going in my head, but since you go so deep, I'm not really worried about a couple things, especially because your squat's so deep. I think you have pretty good hip mobility and range. There are a couple things that I do notice. You do have kind of a butt wink at the bottom, but we'll fix that, and that's all going to be fixed with the way that I'm going to cue your squat and kind of tweak your squat. So first of all, let's talk about let me give you an analogy. So hopefully this will help out. It's kind of a let's try to do this as we go. So let's say we have a rod here, this yellow line here that we're looking at here, right? That's like a clothesline. People still use clotheslines, right? Hang it up. I'm sure you're Filipino, so you know your grandma hangs up clothes. But instead of hanging up clothes, we are going to hang up rubber bands at different lengths. So we're gonna hang up this rubber band that represents your quads. We're going to hang up this other rubber band that represents your adductors, your groin, and then another one for your hamstring, and another one for your glutes. So we're all hanging that up on that telephone, on your grandma's clothesline. So now, if I were to pull all of these all together, so if I stick my finger in between all these holes, giggity, and I pull down, going into this direction, straight down, right? If I pull that down, what do you think is going to have the most tension? I mean, your quads, of course, right? Because this one is the shortest one. It's going to have all that, the amount of length is going to have all that potential energy. So this one's the shortest one, so it's going to be the most tightest, and this one's going to be the loosest one. This one represents your glutes. Actually, in your case, I would say that this would be adductors, because I'll explain later. But this one has the less amount of contribution to the bottom, right? And what does the bottom represent? The bottom represents your bottom of the hole. So right now you're pretty much using a lot of quads. That is compared to, we're not using a lot of adductors in there. A lot of people don't realize that the adductors, they're secondary action besides, the primary action is bringing the foot into midline, right? And then the secondary action is pretty much hip extension. So the adductors help out with your glutes. So along with tertiary actions of stabilizing the hip, but we won't get into that. So let's look at what we can do about that. So the way that you squat, hopefully that made sense. The analogy was kind of, I pulled it out my ass, but let's go ahead and continue to move on. So with your squat, so your quads you have a lot of good strength in that end range of your quad. So what I'm going to suggest as we tweak your program after your first meet is that we're going to take a bit of a wider stance. I would say about 1 inch, maybe even 2 inches out for each leg. It's going to be a little drastic. You might feel weak at first, but it's going to be worth it because what we're doing is essentially we're getting, that rod that we were talking about. We're getting the adductor, and we're basically lengthening it. We're putting it on a higher clothesline. So once we're at that higher clothesline, so it's right here. Now we have equal the amount of the quad. So you see that? Does that make sense? So you're basically putting more tension. So then by the time you're in that hole, right when we need it, we have all the muscles basically having that stretch reflex and being at its optimal length in order to drive you out of the hole and to blast through your sticking point, because your sticking point is your sticking point. It's not going to change at all. I mean, Greg Nuckols did a great article about your sticking point's going to remain the same, because that's basically where your passive, your contractile strength and your passive, I'm not going to get into it because I already shot this video about 2 times already. I kind of go off on a tangent, but again, just know that your sticking point is your sticking point. All we can do is change the momentum going into it, so then we can blast through a sticking point. That's why a lot of, I'm not sure if you heard of CAT training, CAT training, compensatory acceleration training. It's basically trying to explode as fast as you can so you can blast through the sticking points, along with recruiting the most motor units, because motor units are going to be the best thing for recruiting more strength, because the more motor units, the more muscle. The more muscle you use, the more force. The more force, the more gains. The more gains, the more girls. The more girls, the more fame, right? That's basically how it works. So let's go ahead and continue. I'm trying to make this video short, but we are already on 10 minutes of talking about your squat, and it's not even to the point where I want to tell you what I'm going to do, because your squat is probably the one that I want to tweak the most, because it has so much potential in my eyes. At least that's, and I'm a squat kind of guy. I feel like, if anything, I wish there was only squat only meets, but I digress. So we are going to bring out your stance. That's going to get your adductors in, because your a stretch muscle is a recruited muscle. So you stretch out that adductor. That's going to help with hip extension, along with cutting your depth a little shorter, because again, it's about, powerlifting is about a game of inches. If you're going like 3, 4, 5 inches more down than usual, when you could possibly get more weight on the bar and just squat how you do. Get more weight on the bar and squat a little bit higher, that is okay. It's still a good lift. Of course, I like what you said about not worrying about red lights, but you definitely don't have to worry about red lights. Just we're going to tweak it out a little bit. And I mean, if you think about physics, you're doing more work. Work is force times distance, and you're still having the same amount of force, but now you're cutting off the distance and not going as far. So if you're cutting that distance, then you're doing less work, and then that will help hopefully kind of manage more fatigue, and then you can really hit that third attempt a little bit better, because you're less fatigued, right? And probably even if you were to increase the weight, since you have less fatigue, you'll be able to call upon the powers of your ATP. Again, I'm going a little geek mode with the ATP, but let's save that for another time. So we bring out that stance, and then also what I do notice, like I said, I see that butt wink. So what's happening there is that you're trying to I'm sure you've heard of that before, where let's say your hamstrings, because there's not only just there's not other things. There are other things that contribute into a butt wink, but let's just, for simplicity sake, we'll say it's your hamstrings. So you're in this kind of curved position for your torso, and then so when you come back into the hole, you continue to curve it through, and so you're actually putting slack onto your hamstrings when you do a little posterior tilt. Basically, it's the same movement as if you were a dog taking a shit. It's because you're pushing your hips forward, kind of like if you're humping the air, you're tilting your hips backwards, and then again, those two muscles that help out with that movement are going to be your glutes and also your rectus abdominis, and that is basically, it's synergistic. But anyways, you don't have to worry about that. Let me worry about that. What I want you to do is your bracing. To start off with your bracing, you start off slightly forward. Now, if we could get you a little bit more upright and kind of push your hips forward more and lock that in. So I'm a fan of being into being in neutral, maybe even slight posterior tilt to begin with during the squat. But in your case, I would actually reverse that, just because then you'll be a little bit into a anterior pelvic tilt and brace tight. We still want your ribs to be bracing and stacked over, but slight anterior tilt, because then what that's going to do is build in that tension in your hamstring, and then you won't go as deep into the squat. So that's one thing, is we'll fix your bracing. Now I'm throwing all these cues at you, throwing all these techniques, but again, as you go on and you coach with me, I'm going to slowly throw one cue at a time, because I've noticed throughout the years that if I throw all these cues, none of them stick. So we're doing one by one. At first, after your powerlifting meet, we are going to adjust and get you used to just squatting with a little bit wider, and then again we'll start throwing these on. But for now, this is your first time video, this is your video analysis video, so we are going to make sure that I throw everything I can, and then that's the game plan, and then we base everything off that. So that's the reason why my coaching is the shit, because I don't do cookie cutter programs. You'll notice that every one of my clients, because they all follow each other on Instagram, it would be, if they're all doing the same shit, they'll call me out on it. And so the reason why I do these video analysis is so I can show you that there's pretty much a game plan for everything that I'm doing, and then we base it off of there. So again, we will slowly incorporate the cues. So that's one of them. Let's see. Another thing that I want you to do is, because you have such good strength in your quads at the end range, if we were to ask you to widen your stance, you're not going to get much of a stretch in that quad. It's almost like if we brought that clothes hanger of your grandma's clothesline a little bit lower on the quad side. So that's not a good thing, because you have really good strength in that kind of rebound. So what I'm going to ask you to do to kind of offset that is, in order to take advantage of that stretch, I'm going to ask your knees to go forward. When I want your knees to go forward, that's basically asking, because your torso angle and your knee angle is going to be dictated by the placement of the bar on your back. Well, I shouldn't say that. I should say the bar placement on your back is going to determine your torso angle, and that torso angle is going to determine your knee, how much the moment arm of your knee is. The moment arm is basically your knees going, the distance between your knees and the bar. So that's the horizontal distance. So basically what I'm asking you to do is be a little bit more upright and push your knees a little bit more forward. So again, you have pretty good strong quads in that, along with everything that I'm adjusting. I feel like that's going to help utilize your squat better. I am actually going to stop right there, because that's 16 minutes worth of just your squat. And so let's move on to the bench and deadlift. Again, I still have more ideas in my head, but I don't want to make this a 30-minute video because what we're going to do, your accessory that I would hammer for you would be front squats. Because not only is that going to teach you to be a little bit more upright, but it's also going to teach you how to brace a little bit better and not go as deep as you are. So front squats are going to be your jam, along with it teaching you nice upper back tightness and just getting strong overall, especially with your kind of intermediate. I don't want to hammer too much of your competition lift, because you can get burnt out. So what's cool about front squats is that we can scale back the stimulus and still not be like kicking your ass on your central nervous system. I'm sure you heard it a lot. That's just fancy words for you getting fatigue overall by handling all these amount of volume. So now let's talk about your squat, your bench press. So we talked too much about your squat already, but I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with everything. So I do notice with your, let's go and look at this side now. Let's see. By the way, your bar path, it looks pretty good on your squat. But I keep going back to the squat. Squat is my bread and butter, bro. So let's see your bench press. Let's play a couple reps here. We have this angle, then we have this nice angle here. You do a touch and go, so you gotta make sure, you gotta make sure that you pause it for your competition. I would start pausing your competition, or start pausing your deadlifts. Start pausing your bench presses now, because that's gonna be specific to when you start to compete in 3-4 weeks. So what I do notice is, so I would actually have you bring in your grip a little bit. So you're probably wondering why I would do that. Is because the amount of elbow flare is going to be dependent on your arch, your Asian schoolgirl arch, which actually you're lacking that Asian schoolgirl arch. So I'm gonna have to take that Asian schoolgirl card from you, because even though you're bald and beautiful, you are lacking an arch. And so with you having such a kind of not a wide grip, but it's enough to have your elbows below the bench, and that's going to be a compromised position. As you can see, here's your torso, and here is here's your humerus, or your upper arm. So I would want that number 44 degrees. Now it's not going to be science 44 degrees, because this angle is not exactly the straightest angle that would show that, but I do want that number, if we were to look at the same angle, a little bit less. So what that means is that I don't want you to extend your shoulder past your torso. So 2 ways to do that. We can either arch really hard and so the bar stops a little bit higher, and then that means that your elbow stops a little bit higher as well, or we can bring in your grip and touch a little bit lower on the chest. So those are 2 ways that we can do it. Right now, I don't think you have. You kind of look like a guy that might not be able to arch as much. That's just me being biased and not really putting any thought about that. It's just my first impression. I don't know why. I think you're older than me. You're like 35, 36 years old. So I would say we start off with bringing in your grip first and touching a little bit lower. And so what that's going to do is going to help, because this is the hard part. This is a little harder on your shoulder. Plus, you don't have as much it's about the strength tension relationship, or length tension. And so if we started off here, then that would be a little bit better. You would be able to press more, because everyone can, they can board press more than they can like deficit bench press, like with a Duffalo bar or Buffalo bar. Anyways, I digress. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to tell you that we're going to work on bringing your stance in, or bringing your grip in, and then we're going to hammer out those triceps. What I would do to kind of facilitate this new technique is I would accessorize you with a little bit more close bench pressing. That's going to hammer your triceps and also your anterior delt, and that's going to help get your bench press up, because it's going to be a more biomechanically efficient. Your bar path is pretty damn good. I mean, if you look at it, you do have that kind of advanced J shape going on. And that's what we want. I can show you a study where the J shape is basically what we want, because it's different when you're lying down. Biomechanics is different from physics when you're bench pressing. So I stole that stole that quote from, I want to say, the muscle doc, Jordan Shallow. That was pretty genius because, you know, it's different when you're bench pressing because different parts of the bench press is going to be different because you can actually activate more muscles in a certain position rather than just going straight up and down. I used to be a straight up and down kind of guy, like maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, because I thought, you know, less work, right? We want to reduce the amount of work, but it's different. Biomechanics is different because you're actually stronger in different positions, even though you're doing a little bit more work because you want to actually include more work for those muscles. So again, I am trying to cut this short because we're at 22 minutes now, and that's a little bit ridiculous for video analysis. Actually, it's not that ridiculous. I've had longer. That's what she said. But it's just, that's what it is. So let's talk about your deadlift. Let's see this deadlift. It's pretty damn good. How much is on the bar there? About I want to say 475-ish. So not bad. I mean, look, you're making the earth shake, so that's pretty good. So let's look at how I would fix it if it needs to be fixed. Yeah, it looks pretty damn good. I don't know if I would change much. You have pretty good, um, strong deadlift. If anything, I would try to get a little bit more tighter in the lats, maybe depress the shoulder. I'm not sure if you already did that. You'll see a lot of people, even me, kind of like shrug up and then shrug down. I bet it could be a whole lot tighter. The lats are the only muscle that kind of attach from the spine to your humerus, so that's going to be pretty important to have that bar path pretty good. Let's look at the bar path. So here is, I mean, again, this is not science because of the, what do you call it, the angle, but let's look at how the bar path is. Oh, look at that. See, not too bad. So for your deadlift, I wouldn't worry too much about your deadlift. It looks pretty damn good, in my opinion. I mean, your arms are straight down. That's what we want. You're getting some, your hip right here. You see how your hips rise slightly before your shoulders. That's just me being nitpicky. It's not too bad at all. Shit, you might have a better conventional than me, to be honest. So, if anything, I wouldn't change it too much. We would just do better, proper programming for it. So again, sometimes when your deadlift looks as good as you do, you might want to hammer it too much, and that could be a fault. Sometimes people tend to do what they love too much, or what they're good at, and then they kind of just YOLO the programming. So for your deadlift, we're just going to have smart deadlift programming. For the accessory for that, I would probably actually do like a deficit deadlift, and a very small deficit. I would say a 1-inch deficit for your accessory, just because what happens here is that your hips are raising. I'm not sure if that's the slack out of the bar, but again, two things that I'm trying to achieve with a deficit deadlift is that this hip rising first, if we put you on a deficit and we start lower, and then you start to raise up your hips, then your hips are actually going to be at the same moment, same position you are when the bar leaves off the floor on a regular deadlift. Hopefully that makes sense. We're just trying to close that gap where your hips rise up faster and just try to get you strong to begin with in that starting strength. So there's a difference between the stretch reflex and a starting strength lift. Starting strength lift, that's your deadlift. It's pretty much from no bounce at all. So again, that's one thing that we're trying to do. Again, along with the deficit deadlift of 1 inch, I'm also trying to get your quads in a little bit lower, because we're trying to strengthen that range of motion of having your quads, because I've seen your squat. Your squat is a whole lot deep when it comes to your quads, and I'm wondering if your quads are a little bit stronger, having a little bit more of a stretch on them, rather than having them in a shortened position like this. Hopefully that makes sense. Stretch, your quads stretch at the bottom of a squat. In your deadlifts, your quads aren't as stretched, and we're trying to elicit maybe a stretch in there. So having your hips slightly lower, it really depends how we go. To be honest, it's hard to say if this would benefit you, but that's the direction I'm taking, and I do pretty well with all my clients making pretty damn good gains in the first 3-4 months, and then from there we will reassess. So hopefully that has been helpful. I'm sorry this video was 26 minutes long, but that's what it is. Sometimes it's longer than people expect it. Giggity goo. So I appreciate you choosing me as your coach. I will have your spreadsheet ready. Just give me a couple more days. I did say that it takes me about 7 days from when you first send me the payment, but it's because I pour my heart and soul into this. And not only, I'm obsessed about this stuff. So it's what it is. I'm sorry that it takes a little bit longer, but again, I feel like if you hire me, you know that I tend to be a little bit more detailed than usual, and I want to make sure that you have your gains, because again, your PRs are my PRs. My PRs aren't coming in as frequent as I like it, which that tends to be normal with the amount of lifting years that I have. But again, I live vicariously through you guys and through my clients. So I do appreciate you choosing me as your coach. And if you have any questions, definitely let me know. You have constant access to me. And also, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, on the spreadsheet, I'll explain everything in great detail in all the little columns of my cues and everything like that. And then there's also going to be a column of a couple of columns where I track your sleep, your progress, how you're feeling, how the reps feel, and additional things where, depending on what you have on your goals and your body weight and shit like that, you could give me feedback on there as well. And so there's plenty of ways to communicate with me. But again, let's just call it a day here. Thanks again for choosing me as your coach. Train hard, train smart, and again, I'm excited to work with you, brother.